Dr. Macarthur, thank you for your message that was biblically encouraging. Thank you. I want to ask you two, when you met each other for the first time, or when did you become aware of each other's ministries? Do you remember?
I think I remember. He wouldn't remember. Of course, I met him at 12:30 KTIS AM or whatever. There he was, screaming away years and years ago. And I didn't like this guy. He was just too harsh for me. And he came to speak at Bethel, whether it was a Founders Week or something, and we had breakfast together with John Sailhammer. And that's the first time we ever met. And I asked you the question, I'm trying to remember why I asked you this, whether I was thinking at that point about just leaving and going to Bethlehem, but because I don't remember the date. If you were starting over, how would you make sure evangelism happened in your local church, since I saw you as an expositor instead of an evangelist? And you said the first staff member I would add would be an evangelist. So that's my memory of our first encounter.
It was at
a restaurant that I think has gone defunct somewhere up in New Brighton.
You remember the year?
Would have been at the end of the 70s.
Yeah, he's right. I don't remember that. I hate to say that. But there was a real highlight in my life, and he was a part of that highlight. And he mentioned it earlier when I wrote the Gospel According to Jesus. I was so exercised because that no lordship theology was coming out of the heritage that was my heritage, in that sense. And when I wrote that book, I didn't know anybody outside of that group, really. And I didn't know how this book would be received. And when Jim Boyce agreed to write a foreword, and you wrote an endorsement, that was absolutely stunning to me, because I was really not moving in Reformed circles at that time. I was a leaky dispensationalist, and that was my world. And I realized that I was much more one of you than I was one of them, So I was so overwhelmed that John gave such a good, encouraging endorsement to that. And that's when I first, and of course from then on, I've read and followed your ministry with joy, gratitude. And another one of the little highlights of my life was when we had a little meeting down in Louisville, and John got the assignment to pray for me. And I was so blessed just to have him pray for me. I'll never forget that.
You talked about your father in the beginning of your message, and I was looking this morning at the dates of your two fathers' lives, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Dr. Jack Macarthur, 1914 to 2005. Dr. Bill Piper, 1919 to 2007. It's almost the exact same lifespan. Both doctorates, honorary doctorates from Bob Jones, both Baptists, both traveling evangelists. Just if you could both talk about the examples, the lessons that you remember specifically from your dad of faithfulness and endurance, particular things that stick out to you that have impacted your ministry and life.
When you say that, I would just love to have heard your dad. I don't think I ever did. But I probably should just say a little bit and then you say a little bit, and maybe we'll keep talking, but I could talk forever about my dad. The main distinctive about my dad's evangelism is that it was so doctrinal. He was a Bible saturated in the dispensational school, but so doctrinal. which is why he was different. So he did his evangelism by developing the doctrine of regeneration, or the doctrine of hell, or the doctrine of heaven, or the doctrine of repentance. That's the way he thought. And so I grew up assuming that's the way you handle the Bible. That's what you do. Even if you do evangelism, if you shepherd a church, you take the Bible and you find what it means across its terrain and its coherency, and that's what reality is. So it was an awesome privilege to grow up in a home where my dad would leave for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If he crossed the country in those days, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, come home for 4 days, 8 days, leave again. And just one other thing is, a lot of people, I feel like I've got my back to you folks. A lot of people get bent out of shape at Dad's this or that, and I never, ever resented my father's ministry, though he was home a third of the time. Ever. It seemed like an awesome privilege to me, and I think the key there was that my mom loved his ministry. She never badmouthed him. She never said, "Where is he? I never comes home." Never was there any of that. So I just growing up, you assume Dad's got a call on his life. This is it. My job with my mom is to back him up. And when he comes home, he tells the stories of the victories of the gospel and what could be better. He also brought jokes with him. We'd sit at the table and he'd give me his latest joke.
Well, again, it's a very hard thing for me to jump in. I think the thing that always stood out in my mind was how, just on a personal side, how much my dad loved my mother. It was just a treasure to me. I learned how you're supposed to love your wife. He just loved her, and he loved his children in a unique way. Very endearing qualities. He also was an evangelist with Fuller Foundation, with Charles E. Fuller, traveling evangelist around the States. He was an evangelist at Moody in the years of William Culbertson when he was president of Moody. I think it was Culbertson. Anyway, somewhere in there. And he traveled all over in citywide meetings, all over the Midwest and the East. He graduated from Eastern Seminary in Philadelphia, so he had all kinds of Eastern connections. So I had the same kind of experience as a kid living in California with my dad, going away for long periods of time on the train and doing citywide meetings and meetings here and there. And he even went overseas a couple of times to do some meetings. And like you, I never resented that. It was just a wonderful thing when he left and a wonderful thing when he came home. But eventually he became a pastor, and I had the privilege from my high school years on, junior high on, to sit under his ministry. And he was an expositor through Matthew, through Romans, through John, and always with an apologetic bent. He was always leaning hard on evidences for biblical veracity, always trying to answer the critic and answer the person who had reasons not to believe the Bible. So everything was laced with that. And that became the predominant emphasis of his radio ministry in the last years. He was on the radio, Voice of Calvary, for 60-some years. So he was faithful. And he used to start the program by playing the marimba. He played the theme at the beginning and the end and preached in the middle. So
my mother played the marimba for my dad.
did she?
Yeah. Hold 2 sticks in each hand.
Yeah, that's right.
And her arms would shake right here. Sorry,
Now you're supposed to cover that up if it's doing that.
I think that's going to end up on YouTube. Did your fathers both want you to be pastors? Did they ever express that desire that you would? I mean, you have 5 generations of pastors.
Well, my father never put pressure on me to be a pastor. He never. He loved the ministry. He loved the church. We never had the church for Sunday dinner or anything like that. He loved the church.